All right. Thank you everyone for joining in. We have with us uh, Divya here. Hi, Divya. Thanks for
Hello,
joining in.
of course.
Folks who have joined in from different corners of the world, I can see some folks here from India, a lot of people, I think, from Europe, some from US, a couple from Latin America. Thank you, everyone who has joined in. You all know the rules, the drill. It's quite simple. It's not a webinar, it's a chat, it's a club, which means we all talk at some point of time, and we all learn. And the question is, what do we learn about? It's different things, different weeks. And this week we are very, very lucky because our guest this week is special. When I'm saying special, she really is. She has been trained as an engineer, as a computer engineer, and post that she did her a master's, if I remember correctly, in cognitive and decision science from UCL, London. And then, she went on to work with one of the very first behavioral science, neuroscience based companies in the country, and worked with them for close to a decade. And then she switched roles and she launched her own company and built a fantastic product. Obviously, it uses a lot of behavioral science. And so who is this particular guest? Is Divya. We know that. What is the product? What's been her journey? We're going to find out, right? So guys, please join in with your Q&As on the chat box. At some point in time, we'll open up the session for Q&A. But first, Divya, very, very warm welcome to you. Thanks for joining in. We are very excited because, not to put any pressure on you, we are in this zone right now where we feel we're going to learn about engineering, about India, about entrepreneurship, about behavioral science, maybe amazing cases. So I think let's start with something about you yourself, Divya.
Awesome. So, hi guys. It's so lovely to meet everyone here. So Prakash has done enough with his words, right? But I think like I was telling Prakash and Louise before you guys came on here, there is just so much imposter syndrome happening right now, because the reason I'm here is I did a master's in cognitive and decision sciences 10 years ago, and that is it, right? But let's talk about, like Prakash said, I think I did my engineering in India. Everybody does engineering, right? So it's like a rite of passage. You either do engineering or you do you finish engineering and then you do MBA, and that's the rite of passage, right? So I had done computer science, and I enjoyed computer science. I enjoyed coding, right? I worked for it's called Infosys. I worked for a multinational software company for a couple of years. And then I had like a real existential moment where I was like, what am I doing? I'm just an ID card, and I don't want to be just an ID card, right? And I was always fascinated with human behavior. I've always been, always, I live in a large family. And that's one of the reasons, very opinionated people, very vocal people. And that's one of the reasons I've always been curious as to what makes people tick, right? What makes people act and react and decide the way they do, right? And so when I said, you know what, I'm not going to be a software engineer forever, I said, let me figure out what to do, right? And the misguided person that I was, I figured that the only thing I could do is probably, which is close to behavioral science, behavior, was HR. Very, very misguided. So I tried to kind of look up and see, should I go the HR route, right? And then I thankfully chanced upon MIT OpenCourseWare, where I tried to look up, what could people do with engineering background. And I then went into the whole thing of AI. I looked at some AI courses, artificial intelligence. Then this was about 12, 13 years ago. And then I was thinking, maybe something a little more psychology and a little less, again, computational and AI. And that's when I chanced upon behavioral science, right? I think I remember the course. It was from, Harvard. And I think it was a PhD. And one of the first thing was introduction to cognitive science. And I looked at the content, and I was I was so happy because I'd found what I wanted to do, right? And then, of course, read the books just to make really sure. I did the whole, and I've done, all of you have done this. I read Predictably Irrational, I read Nudge, and I said, oh, yes, this is amazing. This is what I want to do, right? So I spoke to my family and I said, hey, I'm quitting the software, well paying software job, and I'm going to go study. At that point it was called psychology still, because behavioral science wasn't cool 12 years ago. It wasn't the new place to be. So I told folks that I'm going to quit the engineering and computer science and go do psychology, and they were like, yeah, are you mad? But I think super supportive family. So I found, at that point, US had a bunch of PhD courses, and I couldn't commit 5 years to something I knew nothing about. And therefore, UK had a lot of master's programs, right? And I know I've bored a lot of you with this story already, but that was how I landed in UCL, and I did cognitive and decision sciences in UCL. And it was fantastic, guys. It was amazing. It was such a pity that it was a year only program. So sad. I tried to get as much as I could out of it. I sat in every lecture. I audited different lectures, just to squeeze as much as I could out of it. And just staying in London, being in that vicinity. By the way, UCL is in central London. It's right next, very, very close to LSE and SOAS and a lot of other colleges. And it's amazing, right? So as culture, all of it goes. So we got a lot of stuff there. And then I think halfway through my time in UCL, I saw a company called Final Mile. Surprise, surprise, they were in India 12 years ago doing behavioral science, massive, again, surprise. And I called them halfway through my course and I said, guess what I'm studying? And they'd never heard of it. They'd never heard of behavioral science. They'd never heard of cognitive science. Final Mile was started by 4 MBA grads who had done sales and advertising and had gotten really sick of advertising not doing enough. It created awareness, but it didn't create the actions that they wanted their users and people to take. And therefore, they created Final Mile. And I think the rest was history, right? It was like I finished my course. I didn't even try looking for a job in London. I went back to India, spoke to them, and had one conversation, and they said, come on board. And yeah, I was with Final Mile since. So I'm going to stop and pause. Did you want to come in, Prakash and Louise?
Thank you so much, Divya, for sharing this story, especially around the number of engineers that we seem to produce as a nation. We are an engineering obsessed nation for some reason, more than 1.2 million or so every year. How many of them are technically sound is again, that's a different debate that goes into a different zone. But this curiosity that I had was around, and you said that you did face some resistance or possibly some questions from your family. Infosys is very well known.
Yeah.
And in the 2005s, in the early 2000s, and in those times, Infosys was in fact one of the few companies which was very much respected for the fact that it had made millionaires of people, simple hardworking people. And there were stories of a driver or a guard at Infosys who had taken up shares at the right time and was now a multimillionaire, but still doing this job. And in this time when the IT industry is booming in India, and you decide to quit it and go down into a direction, this is the question, right? So what is it about the behavioral sciences that, specifically in the Indian context, it attracts you, and yet you rarely have parents or neighbors or society pushing the best mind towards taking up those subject? Is it straight up? And no, let me not put up any answer out there to bias your point of view of that. What happens out here, and has there been a change in this?
So let's answer that, right? I think that so Prakash, to answer that, right? And from my own experiences, I come from a place of privilege, so I cannot answer for everybody else, right? So the place of privilege that I had, I could say, you know what, screw the salary, screw it, and I want to go and chase my dreams, right? And Unfortunately, not everybody could take, even today, not everybody can take that call, right, Prakash? Because, and guys, you know what, in India and the culture right here, a software job can bring someone from an engineering degree. The reality of it is it can bring you from let's call it level A of economic strata of society. It can change you and bring you into the middle class, right? And if you're in the middle class, it can go take you to the upper middle class, right? And I think that makes a lot of difference for a lot of people, and therefore Prakash is so much resistance to it, right? And I will add to it the mental models about there are, and of course I have to say the word mental models, but the mental models about science and arts and humanities. It exists. It's not a great thing. I wish our education system was a little bit more exploratory, but it's not, right? You get locked in very early on in high school. You get locked into whether you're going to do science or whether you're going to do humanities, right? And you don't have a choice but to follow that thing that you're locked into, right? And I wish that it was different, but currently the system is not geared in a way that it's different.
I've met and had discussion with multiple folks in the behavioral science space in India, and it would not be wrong to say, I think almost 70-80% of them, who are 30 plus, they are either engineers or they are from an MBA background. And there are a lot of people, young people, and I can see some of them in the crowd, like Christine right now, who've got proper behavioral science training. But now again, going back to this time that you had with Final Mile, and you spent almost a decade out there. And in that 10, 12 years, we have seen an explosion of behavioral science. At least that's the perception from here when it comes to UK and US.
Yes.
Right? A lot of people, a lot of companies using it in different departments like marketing, HR, product design, UX, public policy. But if you look at India itself, again, this is India specific context, and then we'll go on to your product.
Yes.
Between a Final Mile where you joined, who was working since 2008 or 9, and today, we still do not have a lot of companies or folks in the behavioral science realm. I think it'll be less than 10 if you want to count.
Yep.
Well, good to know, at least for me, 1,001 is like kind of one of them. So like, it's a tiny group, so you can like be there. And hopefully the question is there something about the field, or is it an infrastructure thing? Is a system thing? Why are we still at less than 10? Number one. And this is tying up again to the number of people who have now become interested in taking up behavioral science as a line of study for their masters in India. A lot of smart kids are going up to UCL, Warwick, UPenn, LSE, and they're coming back to India for working in this field. So tying out that perspective, also saying, why are we still at less than 10 maybe? And number two, what happens in the next 10 years?
So if the last 10 years were anything to go by, right, Prakash, I think when I joined Final Mile, I was the token behavioral science person, right? Because they could say that now they had one person who did behavioral science, and they were a company that was supposed to be changing behavior with no behavioral scientists in it, right? So I think from there, it has come in the last 10 years, the number of, and by the way, it was very, very lonely. And I've spoken to you, right, Prakash, in the first 4 years, very lonely, because I never got to talk to anyone else who's done this. And the Twitter was not very what it is today at that point, right? Neither was your group was not there. Behavioral Science Club was not there either, right? So it was lonely, but I think that you saw, I mean, Jafar is here, right? Jafar came, about 6-7 years ago. He joined Final Mile. Then Varun came. So it started. There was a trickle, right? And from a 1, it went to a 1 or a 2 per year. And what we also did was because I said that there's a whole ecosystem of people studying these kinds of courses out there, we got interns from there, right? So it went to, let's say, like you said, 10. The reason it's still at a 10 is, I think, right? And it's not just India. We've worked with clients abroad. I think that there is a lot of uncertainty as to the value that behavioral scientists bring. Is it at the strategic level? Is it at the tactical, right? Like, where do they sit? And it's also a little bit of, this is intuitive, right? My grandma can do this, or I'll read Thinking Fast and Slow, and I should be able to, it makes sense to me, right? So I think there's a little bit of that contributing to the uncertainty of where we see a role, right? Because let's face it, most industries, most, whether it's FMCG, whether it's retail, whether it's financial services, they have a way of doing things, right? They have their structures and their organizations and their silos in place. And now behavioral science is coming, and it has to fit in as a horizontal, but people don't know yet, which means that the demand is catching up a lot more slower, right? And when the demand becomes a lot bigger, which it is currently, Prakash, it is changing. I
Do
think
you
the
see
numbers
it
are also.
complementing? Let me just jump in really quickly with this. So, do you see it complementing, for example, the world of UX research and design, consumer research and design? Is that the place where you can see it, coming in the most?
If you're in research and design, you should be working with a behavioral scientist, right? I'm going to be as blunt as that, saying that, and I know I'm talking to a room full of behavioral scientists, and you'll all agree with me, but the fact of the matter is, research methodologies, and we were talking about this earlier on Mentza today, right? If we understanding why human beings do the things that they do complements every single research process out there or research methodology out there. And I cannot think of why there should be a research methodology that doesn't get vetted or added to or complemented by behavioral science knowledge, right? So, and the same way, behavioral science is a blunt tool just by itself, right? You're not, I mean, it's great. I can sit on my chair and say, I can explain why Prakash is doing this. I can explain why Luis is doing this. But if I can't take those insights and turn them into actionable changes in the world, which I need design for, right? And I need designers and products for, then again, I'm lost, right? And you can't sit by yourself. You need to work with, like you said, complement other teams.
Oh, all right. Maybe behavioral science or scientists or strategists need to get like a good marketing team for themselves. That could be one way to look at it. Folks, please start, putting up your questions around engineering, around Indian culture, around marketing, around behavioral science, product design, behavioral science, the whole entrepreneurship journey in the chat box. Louis is going to come down in like a couple of minutes and help moderate the session. And I have a lot more questions, but I think I should not hold the Q&A back, because I think this is a fantastic guest who knows multiple sides. So if I could just ask one more question, and it's tied down to product Mentza, and I'm sure you'll be discussing Mentza. I hope I'm pronouncing it right in details. But one question that I had was around this design philosophy of Mentza. And I was telling someone the other day, saying, I have seen exactly 2 products that have done a fantastic use of upper bounds. And lucky me, both the co-founders of those companies are here right now. There's Beck Weeks. She's in the audience right now, folks. Hi, Beck. Thank you so much for joining in. And Beck has this phenomenal product called Pick. And, Pick has this upper bound in terms of understanding cognitive limits of how much can you learn. And after a point, the app tells you, dude, calm down. I think enough learning for today. Do you want to sign off now? I've never had any app or program tell, saying, you know what, stop now. Maybe you want to come back tomorrow. Pick does that. And then I've seen Mentza, and it says, guys, I know you want to talk 20 minutes or so. Right? And in a world where, let me keep quiet. Yeah. In a world where, we all like to talk, and then half of the time we don't even know what you're talking about. You are like, when you look back, like, what do they talk about? What do they learn? The moment someone says, you know what, if you want to have a fantastic conversation, 20 minutes is good. It's tight. In fact, that's the whole idea of running a very effective meeting.
Yeah.
Right? So I said there are two products who are doing it. So what is the design philosophy? What are the behavioral science ideas that you have got? If you could share without making your competition takes extra notice, or maybe they're taking notice of you, right?
Yeah.
What could you talk about the design philosophy of your product,
Yeah.
Divya, that you can help us understand?
Awesome. So I think first, right, Prakash, it started from how do we, and because we had done a lot of work in ed tech, which is, and we've seen that there's an engagement problem with ed tech. Ed tech is, you have structured course content, you have courses, and people weren't completing the courses, right? You sign up for Coursera, great intentions, but you don't end up finishing it, right? So there was a lot of that kind of projects that Final Mile did, right? And I think during the course of that project, one of the seeds that Anurag, a co-founder, always had was, how do I make learning democratic to everybody? And how do I make it more effective, right? And I think that was the seed for Mentza, right? It went from learning to, it went to mentoring, right? So why should only some of us have access to mentoring type of conversations, right? And then when we looked into mentoring a little bit, we discovered that mentoring itself is undergoing a sea change. It's very, very different from a stuffy, one dimensional. I go to a person who's 20 years older than me and I sit down and learn from them. No, right? I think the field of mentoring itself is changing, where the mentor and mentee both benefit from each other. It's no longer unidimensional relationship. It's a network, right? I think so. When we learned that, we went back to, okay, so then how do we allow everybody to have, we've seen the structured learning, how do we get to unstructured learning, right? Because we are all young professionals, I'm going to call myself young, but we are all at a point in life where we've finished the structured part, we finished our college, we finished school, we finished training on jobs, right? All of these are structured ways of learning, and we are at a stage in life where we learn the most through talking to each other, right? And you guys, you have the right idea here with the conversation format for this webinar also, right? So when we talk to each other, there are nuggets of learning that I get, and this is called unstructured. One of the ways of unstructured learning is conversations, right? So we said, why not? By the way, we didn't know of Clubhouse then. So we said, why not think about conversations as a way to give people the way network, right? Allow them to network with each other in a very, very tight context of learning and growing and professional development. Yeah. So that was where it started from. And being behavioral scientists and knowing how attention spans work, right? There is no way in hell we could have said, let a conversation just go on and on and on, long format for 1.5 hours. We knew that wasn't going to work, right? If I want to learn from a conversation, I want to be focused, I want to be to the point, and I want it to be short, and that's it, right? I think that was the design philosophy for Mentza, and that's where Mentza was born from.
Oh, I like Menza conversations. Confession out here, I enjoy listening to them. The story which I was sharing the other day about us as a team struggling to create a meaningful podcast and also trying to work on a particular TV series.
Yeah.
Nigeria Ka Rajkumar, the Prince of Nigeria.
Yes.
And as a creator, there's a lot of barrier to creating, and sometimes the barriers can put you off, and you put a lot of time, and your go-to market is delayed, right? So that's what happened in both cases. So would have loved it a lot if there was something like a Mentza around that point of time for a proof of concept test.
What test? I will next week. You are coming there, and we are doing a 20 minutes episode 1, series 1 of Nigeria Ka Rajkumar. There's no test or POC. I will see you there next week.
I'm going to pass on this message to my co-founder Rafe with that. But now when I invite in Louise. Louise, please hop on in and help us with the Q&A sessions.
Thanks so much.
Louise, before you jump in, I love the fact that there are so many people from Mentza over here, and look, Sanika and Jafar and all are doing a much better job than me of telling you about the design philosophy and features of Mentza. So Sanika is right. The 5 conversation limit is for any 20-minute conversation, there can only be 5 people is too much, right? It should be like a 3 to 4 people speaking. So that's why there were bounds, but they're doing, thanks guys. Thanks for speaking up. But yeah, Louise, go.
That was just such a great, lively conversation. And for any of the members who are joining us today, you must go to Mentza.com and download the app. And even if you don't hop on any of the conversations, it means you can explore the app and you can find out what it is that we're all talking about, which is that it's an app for 20-minute conversations, very wide-ranging, isn't it, Divya? And now this is the mystery that I need you to explain to me as somebody who now takes part in a weekly circle. It seems that in every circle, there's either yourself or the other founder, Anurag, or Tapasi, and I'm just trying to picture exactly what's going on in your house, Divya, whilst all these circles are going on. How are you possibly in so many circles at so many times? You must be just hoarse from talking. So how does it actually work practically, Divya?
Oh, this is such a great question, Louise. So the reason we're on so many conversations is we're bringing up the baby, right? And we want the correct norms. We want everybody to have positive experiences, and we want everyone. So we're being a little bit of control freaks. Let me tell you that much, right? When we're doing this and trying to hop on in so many conversations so that we set the right norms and the experience for the users. But it is crazy. It's like you work, the day starts at about 9:30, right? And this is you as an entrepreneur, you're donning the hats of, I'm doing copywriting which I cannot do. And I'm doing like content marketing and digital strategy and God knows what else, right? With the limited behavioral science knowledge that I have. And on top of all of that, so we do that during the day when the circles are quite few in number. There's only a few circles that happen during the day, guys. And then the circles start picking up. And when I say circles, each 20-minute conversation is a circle, right? And the circles start picking up at about 6. And from 6 on, all the meetings stop, right? Where the actual design of Mentza happens. And all of the circles start, and it goes on until 11 p.m. And Jafar has a circle every week at 11 p.m., right? But thanks a lot, Jafar. But so like I said, it's crazy. And I live with my 2 kids, my husband and my in-laws. It's 6 people in the house. So I do have support, right? My in-laws pitch in, my husband pitches in, thank God bless his soul. But the guilt that I live with is another level, right? And I think when you talk about a woman founder trying to prove that she is going to be able to pick as much up as all of the men and do more than that, right? And live up to what I think I can do, the amount of guilt that comes with it is just some other.
That's really making me laugh, Divya, because I was convinced when I asked you this question that you were going to say, oh no, it's not as it appears. It just happens that when you sign in, we happen to be, but you really are practically, it's like being on the radio 24/7.
Yeah, it is.
Is that what it's actually like, Divya?
It is. And Louise and Prakash and everybody, right? That doesn't help the imposter syndrome, because you're in conversations where you are giving points of views where you're then questioning in your head as you're speaking, but am I even qualified to say these things, right? But I think that's how a conversation works. So I push past that doubt and the self-doubt every single day, every single circle. And I keep telling all the young ones who come on Mentza and who have this self-doubt of, should I be speaking, right? I was like, we all face it. Every single one. It doesn't matter if they have 40 years of experience, they still do it. So push past it and come and speak your thoughts and your points of views. And Mentza is friendly like that, right? So.
Absolutely. It's extremely welcoming. And so just finally, before I go to the questions that the members are putting, where do you guys see Mentza going? Like, what is the ultimate hope for you?
Yeah, so here is the vision that we have for Mentza, and it's a very long-term vision, so guys, so don't get scared. But the vision is all the users, all of the people on Mentza are creating such great content, right? You're coming and you're speaking, and because it's a learning-oriented platform, they're all getting recorded, right? And look at the confidence it builds in you over time. It does wonders for your ability to even communicate with each other, right? You're becoming a polymath just by the fact that you're sitting in conversation A on design, and then you're going and listening to another conversation on rocket fuel and rocket ships, and you're listening to another conversation on something else, right? Hey, Sharif. Oh, sorry. So yeah, so you're kind of gaining knowledge in so many levels. So the way we want to put it to use is that we want it to, at the end of the day, become a marketplace for recruitment, right? Now imagine a Mentza portfolio. If a Louise has a portfolio of all the circles she created, all the things she's been listening to, right? You don't need a CV or an interview even anymore, right? So I mean, what happens is it should hopefully will become the next gen interview format or the next gen CV or the resume, right? If you look at LinkedIn is full of stated stuff. I did this, I did that, I get endorsed for this and that. Apart from the articles and blogs you write, of course, right? But Mentza is full of behavior. It's like recorded behavior, right? So there's not much cheating you can do. So, there's all of that to kind of,
that's fascinating. I mean, I think that would have been the last thing I would have thought of if I was trying to say where I thought it was going. So you're actually facilitating your members to build their portfolio of their talks, and that's it's quite I don't, it almost sounds sort of charitable, Divya.
I wish. No, it's still a business, Louise.
That's fascinating. All right, well, thank you so much. It's obviously just as crazy as I pictured going on. And Divya, seeing and hearing you talk, you're absolutely full of sort of boundless energy. So I have no doubt that you'll keep it up.
Thank you.
So there's loads of questions flooding in. Some of them were about your early work in Final Mile, and one of our members, if I'm just scrolling back again, it might have been Shrutin, who was telling me he's actually got a bit of a sore throat at the moment, and would I ask his questions? So I'm going to dive straight in with Shrutin's questions, and then I'll invite the members to join us to ask their own. But going back to the work you did at Final Mile, Shrutin's wondering what you thought was the sort of the most challenging and fun project that you worked on, something that you really enjoyed working on.
So I shouldn't have favorites, but I do. I've worked in the financial services space a lot. That was I was taking care of that vertical, but I did go and work on the development sector side of things. And we did a project for, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we were looking at, teenage and adolescent girls in Africa, South Africa specifically. And we were kind of figuring out how we could increase their adoption of, preventive methods for HIV, right? Knowing the amount of, and I think it's such a complex, we come in with behavioral scientists and we say, there's these papers that will help, and let's write down the interventions and the nudges and, all of these emotions that we want to create in the girls. Let's make them little more risk, little less risk seeking. Let's up the risk a little bit, right? And then you go and you live, when you're going to do research, you kind of live the reality and you understand the context of the girls and of the population. And it is fascinating, right? It is complex and it is beautiful to try and even, it's such a nice feeling to be able to even try and solve the problem is such an honor, right? I think that was my favorite project by far, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think it must be the nature of behavioral science, because whoever you talk to who's working in this field, they generally are genuinely enjoying the work that they're doing, and you show that, Divya, with your enthusiasm that you're enjoying what you're doing. Ashwin has a question there which I rather like. Ashwin, would you like to ask the question yourself, or shall I put it to Divya?
Yeah, I can ask this question. So are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Divya, first, I had a chance to download Mentza last week, and I've been hooked onto it since. So,
Awesome.
but what I wanted to ask was from a circle perspective, right? So I was kind of trying to make a parallel between my behavior and say some of the other groups, forums, or Coursera type of say online MOOCs, etc. Right? So some point of time you drop off from those courses. You don't participate in them anymore for whatever reasons, for lack of time or for whatever is it. You don't have the drive to participate in them anymore. So do you, I don't mean to sound provocative, but do you envision that there will be a drop off in the circles as well? Do you see, how do you see the circles sustaining themselves? And have you thought of it before? And how do you think those circles will evolve?
That's such a lovely question, yeah, Ashwin. And absolutely, right? So, and I'll tell you what we've noticed also, and I'm giving away trade secrets, but it's fine. So, people download Mentza, and Ashwin, like you said, once you're in a conversation, right? So, the first hurdle, engagement hurdle, is you get into a conversation, right? But once you're in a conversation, especially if you've spoken, the thrill or the rush that you get out of it, right? When that 20 minutes is over, it's like you've just had a little performance, right? A small one, a micro one. So that thrill is there. And then you jump into conversation after conversation. So if you look at it, people get on. If they get hooked, they go up, right? It's a very steep incline in the number of conversations. And then you figure out that, hello, real life exists, right? I can't keep just doing these conversations. And it comes back down, right, Ashwin? So you do find your sweet spot, right? I know people that have had the app, and especially from the behavioral science community, that have been there from April. And in the beginning, they might have done like 10 conversations a week, right? But now they found their sweet spot of 2 or 3, or maybe even like a conversation once in 2 weeks, right? And people are discerning enough to know that when there is something like, beyond nudge and sludge, or there's something else which we're talking about, something else, they come back in, right? So there's enough of sharing of the content off platform and on platform for discoverability. And that's how we keep people interested. And you're right, it goes up, it goes down, and then people find their sweet spot, right? If that kind of answered your question. It is a challenge. By the way, I take care of engagement on the app, and it's a challenge for me every single day.
That was a great question. Thanks
Divya.
so much. Thanks. And let's get down to basics. Joanne, would you like to put your question to Divya?
Hi, just struggling with the unmute button there. Yeah, Divya, no, it's been really interesting to think about your idea of like conversations, because this is what the Behavioural Science Club has been for me, is like where you get exposed to conversations about behavioural science on a weekly basis, because unfortunately I haven't been able to get a work in the field, but it's been really good to be exposed to different ideas all the time. But I was just wondering, I mean, obviously Mentza is a derivative of mentor, I presume. Is that where the name came from, or was there a lot of thought? How did you come up with the name? Was it just, we're looking for mentor conversations, let's go with Mentza, or did you do a lot of research or into the brand name, or how did that work?
So I wish, so yes, it started from mentoring. Like I said, the seed for Mentza was mentoring, right? Before it went and did the U-turn and did the unstructured learning kind of situation. But because of, mentoring, I think that's where we started from. And I feel ashamed to say we didn't do much user research except ask our own family and friends what they thought about it. But so that was one. And I think that our users, finally, Joanne, came up with way better reasons for Mentza. And I'm going to just steal some of them rather than us having thought about it. So I'll tell you a couple of interesting ones, right? So one of them was, you took mentoring and you turned it around from A to Z to Z to A, right? And that became Mentza. And I was like, why didn't we think of that, right? So that was one. And the other one was a slice of mentoring in 20 minutes, right? Or a slice of conversation and learning in 20 minutes. Oh, Mentza. We didn't think of that either, but I like those ones better. So I'm going to use that to answer your question.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm just wondering where, because when I was hearing Mentza, I was hearing Mentza, and I was like going, Oh my God, this is,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
know.
the
Oh,
Mentza, that organization. But yeah, no, thank you so much for answering my question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joanne. And Jaffer, as you're here with us and you're very familiar with the platform, would you like to put a question to Divya?
Oh no, thanks, Luis. I think it's already answered. I wanted to listen from Divya what the motivation was for Mentza itself, but I think she's talked about it. Yeah.
And I eat Jaffar's ear off a lot. Like he's one of the, like you said, a very familiar user on the platform. So I'm always doing research with Jaffer. I'm like, Jaffer, can you tell me what can I do this better? What can we do that better? So poor Jaffer. Thanks, Jaffer.
That's really great. So thanks, Jaffer. And so the other question I had for you, Divya, in relation to the actual platform is in terms of the way it is, it seems to me to be strongly directed towards the subject of behavioural science. Is that something that you're wanting to keep it like that, or are you hoping it to develop into more general areas?
So such a great question, Louise. Behavioral science is the winning use case which we're trying to replicate for everything else. So if you look at Mentza, right, I know all of the guys here, right, that come on Mentza conversations, especially for behavioral science. It's like a little community, right? There's the Krishlins and Jaffer and Anupriya, so many, Sanika. A lot of people here are part of the behavioral science community at Mentza. So, and it worked, right? Because there's so many of us, we with Final Mile as our, a lot of founders were from Final Mile. And because of that background, we have a lot of, conversations around behavior science. You can't escape it, right? Which is why you're seeing the behavioral science heavy tilt at Mentza and design. But we are looking to look at behavioral science like a use case and replicate it for all other areas as well. So we're trying to build a community for AI, for technology, for policy, and all of these other places as well. Yeah.
And there's no getting away from it as well, Divya, that it is a heavily Indian community as well.
Yeah.
And is it that you actually see it as staying that way? Is that something that's particular about its identity, or are you hoping to go global, or what in that sort of the long term? What are your visions there?
Definitely global. The reason it's India, the reason it's so India based, Louise, has to do more with your previous question of imagine if we had circles on from, the US times as well, we'd pretty much be 24 hours on Mentza, right? Because so it needs, from 6 to 8, all the people come and jump on. There is a community that kind of built, right? It organically grew. Now it needs some effort in the US time zones as well, so that people can do this during their day, right? So we are going to have to grow our team in the US so that they can do what we did with the norm and the experience setting and the getting people organically in and starting communities within Mentza, so that, that can take off. And, we are only constrained by the fact that we're all working out of India and nothing else, right? So no, it's meant to be global, and we have to do a better job at it.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. You could put together a team, I think, from Behavioural Science Club. We've got somebody in practically every country. So, well, it's certainly a fascinating platform. And I think, yeah, as Prakash is saying there, as well as behavioural science, the variety of subjects that are discussed, you could hop on one day and it'll be films, or someone's talking about cooking. You had an author on recently, which is really fascinating, or one's got a very surreal title, something like My Dog, I don't know, rescued me from COVID, or something along those lines. But besides behavioural science, the subject matter is very diverse. And what I found really interesting is actually hopping onto a circle that, in a way, I often wouldn't even know what it's going to be about. It might even have an Indian title, but the conversation is always so welcoming, and yeah, it's certainly got a really lovely feel to it. Sort of in relation to your direct competitor, let's talk about Clubhouse, the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
How is it, you guys obviously talk about that and about other competitors. So, how do you see yourselves in relation to that platform?
Oh, I love that question. And so I'm gonna talk your ears off again, but thanks for that question, Louise. So I think the only thing that we want to say that how we're similar to Clubhouse is the fact that we're both social audio, right? So we have a few things that kind of differentiate and have it going in our direction. One is the context of a very tightly bound context of learning and growing and for the forever curious people, right? The second one is the 20-minute conversations. And I think the biggest difference, Louise, is the fact that because it's a learning platform and it's not meant as a social media platform, all the features of Mentza are designed for learning, right? And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that, right? So Clubhouse cannot record its conversations. They'll get into serious, deep problems if they do. We can, because we share it out. It's public and it's all about learning, right? Two, if you're saying that this 20-minute conversation is about learning, I need features that let me highlight, let me take my notes, let me create my reflections about what I'm learning, right? And I think that's why the features of Mentza are also, you can tap. We're not doing a very good job of talking about it to users, which we're getting better at, I promise. But as if I say something that's phenomenal in the conversation, somebody can go and tap it, and the last 40 seconds of what I said gets highlighted, gets saved, clipped, and saved in your archives, right? So what that means is like you're highlighting a Kindle book, you're doing that on a live conversation, right? And you can then go back and revisit these snippets and then say, hey, these are my thoughts about it and all of it. And every speaker on Mentza gets a portfolio, right? So basically we can tell Clubhouse, what are you giving people in return for the time that they're spending talking on you? And we have that going for us, where we give people their portfolios with all of their recordings and their learnings and their reflections and everything. And Clubhouse right now can't do that, right? Because they're a social media platform. They're not for learning specifically. That's the answer, in a very long answer to your very short.
And I just saw an interesting comment there from Jaffer, who was saying that he had used Clubhouse himself and was actually getting tired of the length of conversation, because that is absolutely the beauty. And from somebody who is hosting a circle now on Mentza, the 20 minutes is a fantastic discipline. It's like the verbal equivalent of Twitter, really, isn't it? Because you come to it knowing, okay, well, ideally I want it to be 15 minutes if I'm talking, so that you can then invite anybody who we haven't actually made it very clear what this is anyone can anyone host a circle, Divya?
Absolutely.
Yeah, anyone can. When you've downloaded the app, anyone can host a circle to talk about your subject. And when you go in as a host, other people join you to listen, but equally they can put themselves forward as a speaker, so that whilst you're giving your circle, talking, chatting, whether it's free form or whether you have an agenda, you can see the people who think they would like to comment, and then you can invite them in for their comments. I mean, it feels like being on live radio, Divya, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That is what I meant by that little burst when you're done with a conversation. You go like, wee, I just did that, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, in many ways, I don't know if this is a positive or a negative, but it carries that feeling, like the way we're together here, guys, for Behavioural Science Club, and we all join and we see familiar faces, like, it is, you're joining a friendly group, but when everyone says goodbye, you kind of hop off. And this is the same with any Zoom call, isn't it, Divya? You hop off and you're suddenly like, oh, right, okay. You're still buzzing and you still want to chat. It's never going to be the same as having a chat with people, and it sort of dissolves naturally. And certainly there is that feeling, Divya, you're cut off at 20 minutes, or I will say as well to everybody, you can extend it for another 5 minutes if you're in the flow, but all of a sudden that's it, it's gone, isn't it, Divya? And you're like, oh.
Yes. So that, I think that's so lovely. And everyone who's been on Mentza knows that feeling of you're in the middle of the first few calls, you're in the middle of a sentence, you see the timer too late and you're cut off in the middle of the sentence, right? And when Prakash said upper bounds, that's all I could think of was the ticking timer going down. But so that experience, yes, people learn, that's the learning curve, right? So then people start noticing from the second time onwards saying, you know what, I have 1 minute, I'm going to cut everybody off and wrap this and bring it to a close. But I think there is still things we can do from a design perspective to improve the experience of the last 30 seconds. And it's in the works. It's in the works.
That's great. So Divya, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you. Anyone here who's with us who doesn't know, I'll just do a bit of self-promotion. I have a circle on Mentza every Tuesday at 2 o'clock where I'm talking through a chapter of Thinking Fast and Slow every week. So we're just going into chapter 4 this coming Tuesday, 2 o'clock my time. But I'm going to hand back to Prakash now to just if there's any final questions and to wrap the event up in the last few minutes. But thanks so much, Divya.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you so much, Louise, for helping us with the Q&As. And folks, feel free to experiment with Mentza. There have been some fantastic conversations that we have been noticing, and Beck has just been saying that, can you use this as a FGD? You have a super focused 20 minutes discussion with users about pick and the experience with it. It was watching the conversation, I realized it can also be a brainstorming team. Maybe you can have a themed conversation, depending on what kind of team you are. Creative teams, they do need a lot of brainstorming, and maybe you have one day do something like playing the devil's advocate, and everyone is trying to shoot down the idea of why it is not going to work. And on day 2, you can take up a pre-mortem approach and try to understand how things can go wrong. And on day 3, you come up with your wildest, optimistic, craziest solution. And maybe those can be a fun way of doing things. And in fact, I just realized maybe we should switch on to using Mentza for our FGDs as a test. Priyanka, please do know that. Maybe that's a good way to start bringing in Mentza for workout here. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm so stupid. I just kept on talking. I went on a train of thought out there. Coming back to one of the last few questions that we have that you could probably touch is, you already talked about the whole imposter syndrome versus learning and losing track of time, conversations after conversations, and still finding out your balance, and the whole upper bound of 20 minutes, which eventually helps you get super focused with the thoughts that you're having, discussion that you're having, and what you're saying. One quick question, 2-3 quick questions, I think. One is around this whole 15 minutes of fame. In the future, everybody's going to have the 15 minutes of fame, and we are living that life. Everyone we know has got one viral post at some point of time. So we all have gotten that. Everyone we know has got some sort of an audience. So we all are, influencers in a way in today's generation. I'm talking in the larger context. Number one is that. Number two is something which I think Sajid Pai, fantastic guy, I think Blue Ventures, he said he came up with this term called non-zoomer. Non-zoomers as a category, essentially creators who may not have a huge consumer group, but they're still creating a lot of content for multiple reasons, and reasons as varied as learning, or it could be to signal authority, or to build up a nice network. So the second is around 50 minutes of fame, the non-consumer part of it. And third is towards this whole, something ethereal being there, where when it ends, it is gone.
Yeah.
Right. So tied down to all three of them, where do you see Mentza going as a product? Does it, I'm just ideating out right? Does it make sense, for example, to remove all the recordings? The FGDs will be harmed out there next. I know because you want the recording, but in general, is there a benefit to maybe saying, you know what, by default, your conversations are not going to be recorded? That's a very special feature list. It brings up a very transient, in the moment feel to it. You are either there or you have lost it. That's how life typically is.
Yeah.
And one of the problem with things that we have today is we have too much of it, and you don't really want it because you can have it anytime you want.
Yes.
So this philosophy, any thoughts around this direction, Divya?
So Prakash, lovely questions, right? And I'm going to talk to the non-consumer part of it. I think Mentza does especially that, right? Because the reason people aren't coming and creating circles for money, they're coming in creating circles because they want to speak, have a conversation. And let me tell you, right? We envision Mentza, we talk about the recording a lot, right? But any user here will vouch for the fact that the conversation was the high for them, right? The fact that they belonged in that ethereal conversation, that was the nice part of it. Now, we do not want to become another app that causes FOMO, right? Now, I don't want to put Prakash at gunpoint and say that here is Nudge and Sludge, we're doing a 20-minute conversation. If you don't attend, you're screwed, right? So I will make you attend. Now, the recordings are more useful than for people who are in the conversation. You're absolutely right. I could shut it off today and people will still come to the platform to do the conversations, right? But for the people who, you don't want them to say, if you missed out, again, real life exists, right? You could be stuck somewhere, you could be stuck in a meeting, but you want to go through that Nudge and Sludge 20-minute conversation to learn. Let's be democratic about learning. And that's one of the other reasons why the recordings exist, so that you don't create this FOMO. There is enough FOMO already created, the fact that you're missing out on a live conversation and being able to ask your questions and contribute your thoughts. But let's not overkill, and let's allow content at least to be present, right? So.
Well, thanks for that. And also, Shrutin, thank you. It is ephemeral is what I meant. I said, I think ethereal. My bad. I meant that
yes,
temporary nature of it. Thank you for correcting that. Divya, thank you so much for being with us, helping us understand Mentza, behavioral science, the roots of behavioral science in this country, where it is going. Yeah. And before you go, any word of advice to us, any one thing that you want to share with us?
So for behavioral scientists, guys, I think, and anyone wanting to do behavioral science, anyone looking to learn, and I think the biggest one which has turned my head around is please learn to embrace uncertainty, right? There are no answers. There's no fixed answers. One paper will tell you that A is good and B framework is good. Another paper will tell you that it's crap, right? So, and for especially somebody like me who went from computer science, where it is literally pun intended, ones and zeros, bits and bytes, to uncertainty and philosophy, and people going, everything, nobody is agreed on the definition of emotion, for crying out loud, right? So I think the one piece of advice is embrace the uncertainty. Don't look for certainty in behavioral science. You're not going to find it. And it's not a cure-all. It takes a lot of work to actually turn it into anything implementable and, a real change. So be prepared to embrace that complexity, I think.
So from that point of view, it makes a lot of sense that the clients who are willing to experiment behavioral science are a little courageous bunch, because
yes,
that team is like, oh, I don't know, we'll find out. Embrace the uncertainty seems to be their mantra. Yeah. And the client is pretty much used to saying, yes, 1 + 1 is definitely 2, and I am promising you an X or Y% ROI on your work.
Yeah.
So to work with a team which says, it's going to be exploratory in nature, and we'll find out through experiments. But it'll be lovely if we can find a way to possibly let the world know. I saw Jafar's comment some time back saying you don't have to wait for academic world to kind of talk about it. Maybe with more conversations on Mentza with people like yourself, Divya, if you find a way to let the world know about this philosophy and why it actually is a sensible approach to living in our world, maybe it becomes a little more fun.
Yep, absolutely. Anyone who knows me knows that I cannot stop talking about behavioral science. So please, guys, welcome. Come to Mentza and I'll talk your ears off there as well.
Thank you so much, Divya. Thank you all. Stay safe. Wear your masks.
I had a lovely time. Yes, guys, stay safe.
Bye.